The November wind cut through the alleyways of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, carrying with it the scent of rain and rotting garbage. Ethan Cole pulled his torn jacket tighter around his thin frame, his 12-year-old body shivering as he crouched behind a dumpster in the alley off 3rd Avenue. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the wet pavement where puddles reflected the dim glow of the convenience store sign across the street. Cedar Rapids wasn't a large city, but it had enough forgotten corners for a child to disappear into. Ethan had been living on these streets for 4 months now, ever since his mother, Sarah Cole, had chosen her methamphetamine addiction over her son. He could still remember the day he came home from school to find the apartment empty, no furniture, no clothes, no note, just bare walls and the echo of his own voice calling for her. The social workers had tried to find him at first. He'd seen the flyers with his school photo plastered on telephone poles downtown, but Ethan had learned quickly that the foster care system was a gamble he wasn't willing to take. He'd heard the stories from other street kids, the overcrowded homes, the abuse, the constant shuffling from place to place. At least on the streets, he answered to no one but himself. Tonight, the cold was particularly brutal. Ethan's stomach growled as he counted the coins he'd collected from recycling cans all day. $2.37, enough for a small bag of chips and maybe a candy bar. He stood up slowly, his joints aching from hours of sitting in the damp cold, and made his way toward the convenience store. The fluorescent lights inside the store felt harsh against his eyes after hours in the darkness. Ethan kept his head down as he walked past the clerk, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Henderson who usually pretended not to notice him. He'd learned that being invisible was a survival skill. People didn't ask questions when they didn't see you. As Ethan reached for a bag of chips, the bell above the store's entrance chimed. He glanced up and saw a man in his mid-30s walk in, wearing a black leather jacket with a patch on the back that read, Iron Brotherhood MC. The man had a strong jaw, dark stubbled beard, and eyes that seemed to carry both kindness and the weight of hard experiences. His name, though Ethan didn't know it yet, was Marcus Reed. Marcus grabbed a coffee and a sandwich, nodding politely to Patricia as he paid. Ethan watched from the corner of his eye, noticing the way Marcus moved with a quiet confidence, the way his motorcycle keys dangled from his belt loop. There was something about motorcyclists that had always fascinated Ethan, a sense of freedom that seemed impossible to a boy who had none. Ethan paid for his meager dinner and slipped back out into the night. The alley behind the store was his usual sleeping spot, where cardboard boxes provided minimal insulation against the concrete. He settled into his makeshift bed, chewing slowly on his chips to make them last longer, when he heard voices nearby. "Nice bike you got there, man." The voice was aggressive, laced with false friendliness. Ethan peered around the edge of the dumpster and saw 3 men surrounding Marcus, who had just exited the store and was walking toward a gleaming Harley-Davidson parked under a streetlight. The 3 men looked rough, unshaven, wearing stained clothes, with the jittery movements of people high on something stronger than life. "Thanks," Marcus replied evenly, his hand moving instinctively toward his jacket pocket where Ethan could see the outline of his phone. "Have a good night, fellas." "Not so fast." The tallest of the 3, a man with a scar running down his left cheek, stepped directly into Marcus's path. His companions, one with a shaved head and multiple face tattoos, the other thin and wiry with darting eyes, flanked Marcus on either side. "How about you give us the keys, save us all some trouble?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "That's not happening. Walk away while you still can." The scarred man laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the brick walls. 3 against 1, tough guy. Do the math. What happened next occurred so quickly that Ethan almost missed it. The tattooed man swung first, connecting with Marcus's jaw and sending him stumbling backward. Marcus recovered quickly, landing a solid punch to the man's gut, but the other two were already on him. The scarred man pulled something from his pocket, a metal pipe, and swung it toward Marcus's head. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He should stay hidden. He should let the adults handle their own problems. He'd learned long ago that getting involved only brought pain. But as he watched Marcus struggle against 3 attackers, something inside him snapped. Maybe it was the months of helplessness, of feeling powerless and invisible. Maybe it was the memory of his mother's abandonment and the anger that came with it. Or maybe it was simply that Marcus had kind eyes and Ethan had seen too little kindness lately. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed a handful of rocks from the alley ground and charged forward. "Leave him alone!" His voice cracked with fear and adrenaline as he hurled the rocks at the attackers. One struck the scarred man in the temple, causing him to turn with fury in his eyes. "Get out of here, kid!" Marcus shouted, using the distraction to break free and deliver a solid kick to the wiry man's knee. The man went down with a howl of pain. But Ethan's intervention had given Marcus the opening he needed. The motorcyclist sprinted to his bike, fumbling with his keys as the scarred man abandoned Marcus to advance on Ethan. The boy's courage evaporated as he saw the rage in the man's face. He turned to run, but his worn sneakers slipped on the wet pavement. "You little punk!" The scarred man grabbed Ethan by the collar and slammed him against the brick wall. Stars exploded across Ethan's vision as his head connected with the rough surface. He tried to scream, but the air had been knocked from his lungs. Through the ringing in his ears, Ethan heard the roar of Marcus's motorcycle engine coming to life. Good, he thought distantly. At least the man would be safe. Then the first real blow came, a fist to his stomach that made him double over, then another to his face, and another. The tattooed man had recovered and joined in, his face twisted with vindictive anger. "Think you're a hero, street rat?" He kicked Ethan's ribs, and the boy heard something crack. The pain was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, a white-hot agony that spread through his chest with each breath. "That's enough!" The wiry man, clutching his injured knee, limped over. "Cops might come. Let's go." The scarred man delivered one final kick to Ethan's head, and then there was nothing but darkness and the distant sound of motorcycle engines. Ethan didn't know how long he lay there in the alley, his blood mixing with the rainwater that had begun to fall. Time became meaningless, just a blur of pain and cold. He thought about his mother, wondered if she ever thought about him, if she even knew he was suffering. He thought about dying there, alone in an alley, just another forgotten statistic in a city that had too many already. Then, through the haze of pain, he heard a different sound, the rumble of a motorcycle returning. Strong hands lifted him gently, and a voice thick with emotion spoke near his ear. "I got you, kid! I got you! Stay with me!" Marcus Reed had come back. The emergency room at Mercy Medical Center was a blur of harsh lights and urgent voices. Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness as nurses cut away his torn clothing and doctors examined his injuries. He heard words like concussion, fractured ribs, and severe contusions. Someone asked about his parents, and he heard Marcus's voice, strained but firm. "I don't know who they are. I found him like this." It wasn't entirely a lie, Ethan thought distantly. Marcus didn't know about his mother, about the empty apartment, about the months of sleeping in alleys. And Ethan wasn't about to tell him. Hospitals meant social workers, and social workers meant foster care. Even through the pain, that fear remained sharp and clear. But his body betrayed him. As the morphine flowed through his IV, Ethan's defenses crumbled. A social worker named Jennifer Morrison arrived, a woman in her 40s with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much suffering. She sat beside Ethan's hospital bed with a gentle patience that reminded him, painfully, of how his mother used to be before the drugs. "Ethan," she said softly, holding the ID she'd found in his jacket pocket, his old school ID from Lincoln Elementary. "That's your name, right? Ethan Cole?" He wanted to deny it, to give a false name, but the fight had left him. He nodded slightly, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "Where are your parents, sweetheart?" The endearment broke something inside him. "Gone," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "My mom, she left 4 months ago." Jennifer's expression didn't change, but something softened in her eyes. "And your father?" "Never knew him." Each word was an effort, his split lip making speech painful. "You've been living on the streets." She didn't sound judgmental, just sad. Ethan nodded again. "I won't go to foster care. I won't." The words came out with more force than he'd intended, and he immediately regretted it as pain flared through his ribs. "Let's not worry about that right now," Jennifer said, though they both knew it wasn't really a choice. "Right now, we need to focus on getting you better." In the hallway outside, Marcus Reed stood with his arms crossed, his jacket still stained with Ethan's blood. A police officer, Detective Raymond Wallace, was taking his statement about the attack. Marcus described the 3 men in detail, though they both knew the chances of finding them were slim. Men like that were ghosts in cities like Cedar Rapids. They appeared, caused damage, and vanished back into the shadows. "The kid saved my life," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "He didn't have to do that, he's just a little kid, and he put himself in danger for a complete stranger." Detective Wallace nodded, writing notes in his pad. "You said you'd never seen him before." "Never. But I'm going to make sure he's okay. That kind of courage, that's rare, especially from someone so young who's clearly been through hell." Marcus's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "When I rode away, I thought I was clear. But then I realized the kid was still there, and I heard screaming. By the time I got back..." His voice broke slightly. "You did the right thing bringing him here," the detective assured him. "He's lucky you came back." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Marcus replied. "That kid has a warrior's heart. I just hope the system doesn't break it." That night, after the doctors had stabilized Ethan's condition and moved him to a regular room, Marcus sat in the chair beside his bed. The boy was sleeping fitfully, occasionally crying out from nightmares. Every time he did, Marcus would speak softly, words of reassurance that he wasn't sure Ethan could hear, but said anyway. As dawn broke over Cedar Rapids, painting the hospital room in shades of orange and gold, Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the group chat for the Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club. The message he typed was simple but powerful. "Brothers, I need to tell you about the bravest kid I've ever met. His name is Ethan Cole, and he saved my life tonight." He attached a photo he'd taken of Ethan's battered face, careful to capture the boy's courage even in unconsciousness. Then Marcus began to type out the full story, knowing that once his brothers read it, things were about to change for one forgotten boy in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The first response to Marcus's message came within minutes. It was from Daniel "Bear" Thompson, the president of the Iron Brotherhood MC's Cedar Rapids chapter, a mountain of a man with a gray beard and a reputation for fairness that extended well beyond the motorcycle community. His message was characteristically direct. "Where are you?" "I'm coming now." By the time the sun had fully risen, 6 members of the Iron Brotherhood had gathered in the Mercy Medical Center's waiting room. They were an imposing sight. Leather vests bearing their club's colors, weathered faces that spoke of miles traveled and hard lessons learned, tattoos covering arms crossed in identical postures of concern. Patricia Henderson from the convenience store would have barely recognized them as the men who occasionally stopped for coffee on their weekend rides. Bear Thompson was the first to enter Ethan's room, his heavy boots making soft thuds on the linoleum floor despite his attempt at quiet. He stood at the foot of the bed, looking at the small figure wrapped in white bandages, and something ancient and protective stirred in his chest. He'd seen violence before, too much of it, but violence against children struck a different chord entirely. "Tell me everything," Bear said to Marcus, who hadn't left Ethan's side since they'd arrived at the hospital. Marcus recounted the story in full detail this time, from the attempted robbery to Ethan's fearless intervention to the brutal beating that followed. As he spoke, more club members quietly entered the room. Jason "Hawk" Martinez, a former Marine with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Robert "Bobby" Sullivan, a mechanic whose hands were gentle despite their size. Michael "Priest" O'Connor, so nicknamed for the rosary he always carried. Thomas "Slider" Webb, the youngest member at 28. And Christopher "Doc" Anderson, who actually was a doctor, though his practice dealt more with veterinary medicine than people. "The kid's been living on the streets for 4 months, Marcus continued, his voice dropping. His mother abandoned him. No father in the picture. And even after everything he's been through, he still had the heart to help someone else." "That's not just heart," Priest said quietly, his fingers unconsciously touching the rosary in his pocket. "That's character. The kind you can't teach." Ethan stirred in the bed, his eyes fluttering open. The morphine had worn off slightly, and the pain was returning in waves. What he saw when his vision focused made him tense with fear. A room full of large men in leather vests, all staring at him. His first instinct was to run, but his body wouldn't cooperate. "Easy, son," Bear said, his voice surprisingly gentle for such a large man. "We're not here to hurt you. We're Marcus's brothers. Well, not by blood, but by choice. He told us what you did for him." "I didn't do anything," Ethan whispered, his throat dry. I couldn't just watch." "That's more than most people would do," Hawk said, stepping forward. His military bearing was evident in every movement. "You put yourself in danger for a stranger. That takes courage most adults don't have." "Are you guys a gang?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking slightly. He'd heard stories about motorcycle gangs, seen them on TV. The thought both frightened and fascinated him. Bear chuckled, a deep rumble that somehow eased some of Ethan's tension. "We're a motorcycle club, son. There's a difference. We're brothers who ride together, look out for each other, and try to do some good in this world when we can. We follow the law, pay our taxes, and some of us even coach Little League." He nodded toward Bobby, who gave Ethan a small wave. "What do you want with me?" Ethan asked, the familiar defensiveness creeping back into his voice. In his experience, adults who showed interest in him always wanted something, usually to ship him off to some facility where he'd be just another number. "We want to say thank you," Marcus said simply. "You saved my life, Ethan. That means something to us. It means everything." Before Ethan could respond, Jennifer Morrison entered the room, stopping short when she saw the gathering of bikers. Her expression was professional, but cautious. "Gentlemen, visiting hours haven't officially started, and I need to speak with Ethan about his situation." "We understand, ma'am," Bear said respectfully, gesturing for his brothers to follow him out. "We'll be in the waiting room if you need anything, kid. Anything at all." As the bikers filed out, each one gave Ethan a nod or a small gesture of respect. It was strange and overwhelming, and Ethan didn't know what to make of it. He'd spent 4 months being invisible, and suddenly he felt seen in a way that was both terrifying and oddly comforting. Jennifer pulled a chair close to Ethan's bed and opened her folder. "Ethan, we need to talk about what happens next. You're 12 years old, which means you're a minor. Without a parent or guardian, you're a ward of the state. That means foster care, at least temporarily, while we try to locate your mother and assess the situation." "You won't find her," Ethan said flatly. "And I told you, I'm not going to foster care. I'll run away again." "Running away nearly got you killed this time," Jennifer said gently but firmly. "Those men could have done much worse. You have 3 fractured ribs, a severe concussion, a broken nose, and more bruises than I can count. You need time to heal, and you need stability." "I need to be free," Ethan shot back, then winced as the outburst aggravated his injuries. Freedom and safety aren't mutually exclusive, Jennifer replied. I know you've had bad experiences or you've heard stories, and I won't lie to you, the foster care system isn't perfect. But there are good people in it, families who genuinely care. Will you at least give it a chance? Ethan turned his face away, staring at the wall. He didn't answer because he didn't have an answer that wouldn't result in the same outcome anyway. The decision wasn't really his to make. In the waiting room, the Iron Brotherhood members were having a different conversation. Bear had pulled up a chair and faced his brothers, his expression serious. Marcus shared Ethan's story in the club chat. By now, every chapter in Iowa has read it. I've been getting messages all morning. Saying what? Doc asked, though he could guess. Saying they want to help. Saying this kid deserves better. Saying that if he could stand up for one of us, we should stand up for him. Bear pulled out his phone and scrolled through the messages. I've got responses from Des Moines, Davenport, Sioux City, Waterloo, and it's spreading beyond Iowa. The Midwest chapters are all talking about it. What exactly are they proposing? Hawk asked, his tactical mind already working through possibilities. I'm not sure yet, Bear admitted, but I think we need to do something bigger than just a hospital visit and a get-well card. This kid needs stability, support, and protection. The system is going to put him in foster care, and who knows what kind of situation that'll be. We could help financially, Bobby suggested. Make sure he's placed somewhere good, maybe help pay for things he needs. That's a start, Priest agreed. But money isn't everything. The kid needs to know he's not alone. He needs to know that what he did mattered, that people care about him. Slider, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. What if we did a ride? A big one. Show him that the Brotherhood stands with him. Let him know he's got hundreds of people who have his back. The idea hung in the air for a moment, each man considering it. Then Bear slowly smiled. That's not a bad idea, Slider. Not bad at all. But we'd need to coordinate with multiple chapters, get permissions, make sure it's done right. I can handle the logistics, Hawk offered. If we're doing this, we do it properly. No half measures. Agreed, Bear said. But first, we need to make sure Ethan's stable and figure out where the system is placing him. Marcus, you're the one he knows. Stay close to him. The rest of us will start making calls. Over the next 3 days, as Ethan remained in the hospital recovering from his injuries, something extraordinary began to happen across the Midwest. Marcus's message, along with the photo of Ethan's battered face and the story of his courage, spread through the motorcycle community like wildfire. It jumped from the Iron Brotherhood to other clubs, the Road Warriors, the Thunder Riders, the Midwest Guardians, even independent riders who didn't belong to any club at all. Each club had its own culture, its own traditions, and normally its own territory that others respected. Rivalries existed, sometimes stretching back decades. But Ethan's story cut through all of that. Here was a child, abandoned, homeless and beaten, who had still found the courage to help a stranger. It was a reminder of the values many of these riders held dear: honor, courage, and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Victoria Viper Chen, the president of the Road Warriors Des Moines chapter and one of the few female club presidents in Iowa, was the first to reach out to Bear. "We want in," she said simply when he answered her call. "Whatever you're planning for this kid, the Road Warriors stand with you." "Even though we're different clubs?" Bear asked, surprised despite himself. "This isn't about club politics," Viper replied. "This is about doing what's right. That boy showed us what real brotherhood looks like, standing up for someone even when it costs you everything. How can we do any less?" Similar calls came in throughout the day. By evening, Bear had commitments from 15 different motorcycle clubs across Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. The number of riders wanting to participate was approaching 500, and it kept growing. Hawk, true to his word, had been coordinating logistics. "We need to be smart about this," he told Bear over coffee in the hospital cafeteria. "That many bikes. We need police coordination, traffic management, proper routes. We don't want this to cause problems or give anyone a reason to paint us as troublemakers." "Agreed," Bear said. "Reach out to Detective Wallace. He's the one handling Ethan's case. If we explain what we're trying to do, maybe he can help us navigate the official channels." Detective Raymond Wallace was initially skeptical when Hawk approached him. In his 20 years with the Cedar Rapids Police Department, he'd dealt with his share of motorcycle clubs, and while most were law-abiding, large gatherings could sometimes lead to trouble. But as Hawk explained the plan, a coordinated ride to honor Ethan's courage and raise awareness about homeless youth, Wallace found himself moved. "How many riders are we talking about?" Wallace asked. "Right now, about 600 committed, but the number keeps growing," Hawk replied. "Could be close to 1,000 by the time we actually do this." Wallace let out a low whistle. That's a lot of motorcycles. You're going to need permits, police escort, the works. And it can't interfere with regular traffic or emergency services. We know. That's why we're coming to you first. We want to do this right by the book. This is about honoring a brave kid, not causing chaos. The detective studied Hawk for a long moment, seeing the sincerity in the former Marine's eyes. "All right, let me talk to my captain and the traffic division. If we're going to do this, we need at least 2 weeks to plan properly. Can you wait that long?" "Ethan's not going anywhere fast," Hawk said. "He needs time to heal anyway. 2 weeks works." That evening, Marcus was sitting with Ethan when the boy finally asked the question that had been bothering him. "Why are you still here? I mean, you don't even know me. You've been here every day, and those other guys keep visiting. Why?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. "When I was your age, I was in a bad situation too. Different from yours, but bad. My dad was an alcoholic, mean when he drank, which was pretty much always. My mom tried her best, but she was scared of him. I felt alone, like nobody cared if I lived or died." Ethan listened, surprised to hear that someone like Marcus, strong, confident Marcus, had ever felt the way he did. "Then one day my gym teacher, Mr. Peterson, noticed the bruises. Instead of just reporting it and moving on, he actually cared. He checked on me every day, made sure I was okay, eventually helped my mom get away from my dad. He didn't have to do any of that, but he did. And it changed my life." Marcus looked directly at Ethan. "You saved my life the other night. The least I can do is make sure yours is worth living. That's what brotherhood means. You look out for each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "I'm not your brother," Ethan said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Not by blood," Marcus agreed. "But blood doesn't always make family. Sometimes family is the people who choose to stand by you. And I'm choosing to stand by you, kid. So are a lot of other people, whether you realize it yet or not." The next morning, Jennifer Morrison returned with news. "We've found a foster placement for you, Ethan. The Williams family in Marion. It's just a few miles from here. They're experienced foster parents, currently caring for 2 other children. They've agreed to take you once you're released from the hospital, which should be in another day or 2. Ethan's stomach dropped. The moment he'd been dreading had arrived. "What if I don't want to go?" "Then you'll be placed in a group home until we can find another foster family," Jennifer said honestly. "But I think you should give the Williams family a chance. I've worked with them before. They're good people." That afternoon, Richard and Patricia Williams came to meet Ethan. They were in their 50s, with kind faces and patient demeanors. Richard was a high school math teacher, and Patricia worked as a nurse at a different hospital. They spoke to Ethan gently, asking about his interests, his school history, what he liked to do. They didn't press him about his past or make promises they couldn't keep. Despite his resistance, Ethan found them difficult to dislike. "We know this is scary," Patricia said as their visit ended. "We're not trying to replace your mother or pretend like everything is suddenly perfect. We're just offering you a safe place to stay while you figure things out. You'll have your own room, regular meals, and a chance to get back to school. What you do with that chance is up to you." After they left, Ethan felt conflicted. Part of him wanted to believe it could work, that maybe this family would be different. But another part, the part that had been hardened by abandonment and survival, refused to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment. Marcus could see the turmoil on the boy's face. "They seem nice," he offered. "They all seem nice at first," Ethan replied bitterly. "Maybe," Marcus acknowledged, "but you know what? You're not alone in this anymore. You've got my number and so do the Williams. If anything goes wrong, if you need anything, you call me. Day or night, I don't care. You call me and I'll be there, and so will every other member of the Iron Brotherhood." "Why would you do that?" Ethan asked, genuinely confused by this level of commitment from virtual strangers. "Because that's what we do," Marcus said simply. "And because you earned it by being brave when it mattered most." What Ethan didn't know, what no one had told him yet, was that in 2 weeks, nearly 1,000 motorcyclists from across 4 states would be converging on Cedar Rapids for a ride in his honor. The Brotherhood was awakening, and once it was fully roused, it would change everything. The Williams home sat on a tree-lined street in Marion, a suburb just northeast of Cedar Rapids. It was a modest 2-story house with blue siding, a well-maintained lawn, and a front porch that wrapped around the side. Wind chimes hung near the door, creating soft, melodic sounds that Ethan could hear as Marcus helped him out of the car, moving carefully to avoid aggravating his still-healing ribs. It had been 6 days since the attack, and Ethan's body was slowly mending. The swelling in his face had gone down enough that he could see clearly from both eyes again, though purple and yellow bruises still painted his skin in mottled patterns. His ribs hurt with every breath, and the doctors had warned him that the healing process would take weeks. But physically, he was stable enough to be discharged from the hospital. Emotionally was another matter entirely. "Ready?" Marcus asked, though he could see the answer written clearly in Ethan's tense posture and darting eyes. "Do I have a choice?" Ethan replied, not unkindly, just stating what they both knew to be true. "There's always a choice," Marcus said. "But sometimes we have to choose between imperfect options. This," he gestured to the house, "is probably the best imperfect option you've got right now." The front door opened before they reached it, and Patricia Williams stepped out with a warm smile that seemed genuine rather than forced. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater, her graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Richard appeared behind her, equally casual in khakis and a plaid shirt. "Ethan, welcome," Patricia said. "Come on in, let me show you around." The interior of the house was comfortable without being ostentatious. Family photos lined the walls, Richard and Patricia at various stages of their marriage, graduation photos, vacation snapshots. But what caught Ethan's attention were the other photos, the ones showing children of various ages, some who clearly weren't biologically related to the couple. Previous foster children, Ethan realized. Evidence of the lives that had passed through this house before him. "We've been foster parents for 15 years, Patricia explained, noticing his gaze. 23 children have stayed with us during that time. Some for just a few weeks, others for years. 3 we were fortunate enough to adopt." She pointed to a photo of a young woman in a graduation cap and gown. "That's Melissa. She came to us when she was 14, angry at the world. Now she's a social worker herself, helping kids like you." Ethan didn't respond, but he filed the information away, evidence that people could survive this, maybe even thrive. The house tour revealed a spacious kitchen where the smell of fresh cookies filled the air, a living room with well-worn but comfortable furniture, and upstairs, 4 bedrooms. "This will be yours," Patricia said, opening a door at the end of the hall. The room was painted a neutral beige with blue accents. A twin bed sat against one wall, covered with a simple blue comforter. A desk occupied the corner near the window, and a dresser stood empty, waiting to be filled. Posters of various sports teams decorated the walls: basketball, baseball, football, a clear attempt to appeal to a boy's interests without knowing what those interests actually were. "We can change the decorations if you want," Richard offered. "These are just placeholders. We wanted it to feel welcoming but not too personalized. This is your space. You can make it your own." "I don't have anything to make it with," Ethan said flatly. All his possessions in the world consisted of the clothes he'd been wearing when he was attacked, currently in evidence with the police, and a small backpack of salvaged items that Marcus had retrieved from his alley hiding spot. "We'll take care of that," Patricia assured him. "Tomorrow we'll go shopping for clothes, school supplies, whatever you need. For now, just rest. Your body needs time to heal." After Marcus left, extracting a promise from Ethan to call if he needed anything, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed in his new room and tried to process everything. The house was nice, the Williams seemed kind, but he'd learned not to trust appearances. He'd learned that people could be kind one moment and cruel the next, that stability was an illusion that could shatter without warning. A knock on his door pulled him from his dark thoughts. "Yeah?" The door opened to reveal a girl about his age, maybe a year younger. She had dark curly hair pulled into 2 puffs, brown skin, and eyes that assessed him with the wariness of someone who'd learned caution the hard way. "I'm Destiny Walker," she said. "I've been here 3 months. Just thought I'd introduce myself since apparently we're going to be housemates." "Ethan?" he replied, unsure of the protocol for this situation. "I know. Mrs. Williams told us about you, about what happened." Destiny stepped into the room uninvited and sat on the desk chair, spinning it to face him. "That true? You really saved some biker dude from getting robbed?" "I guess," Ethan said, uncomfortable with the attention. "That's pretty badass," Destiny said matter-of-factly. "Stupid, but badass. You could have been killed." "I know I was." The words came out before Ethan could stop them, a flash of dark humor about the beating he'd endured. Destiny's expression softened slightly. "Well, you're here now. The Williams are okay, I guess. They follow through on what they say, which is more than I can say for most adults. They've got rules, but they're fair, and they actually listen, which is weird, but not bad." "How long are you staying?" Ethan asked. Destiny shrugged. "Until they find my aunt in Seattle and she agrees to take me, or until I age out of the system. My mom's in jail, dad's dead, and apparently I've got family somewhere who might care. We'll see." Her tone suggested she didn't believe it. "There's another kid too, right?" "Yeah, Tyler. He's 8, been here about 5 months. He's in his own world most of the time, doesn't talk much. Something bad happened in his last placement. The Williams are trying to help him, but..." She trailed off, the unspoken reality hanging between them. Some damage went too deep. Over the next few days, Ethan settled into an uncomfortable routine at the Williams house. Patricia woke them at 7 each morning for breakfast. Actual hot breakfast, not convenience store chips or whatever he could scavenge. Richard would read the newspaper and ask about their plans for the day. Destiny would answer with practiced politeness. Tyler would eat silently, occasionally glancing up with haunted eyes that made Ethan's chest hurt. The shopping trip Patricia had promised turned out to be more extensive than Ethan had anticipated. They went to Target, where she bought him a week's worth of clothes, jeans, t-shirts, a warm jacket now that November was deepening into winter. She bought school supplies even though his enrollment at Marion Middle School wouldn't start until his injuries had healed more. She bought him toiletries, a new backpack, and even asked if there were any books or hobbies he was interested in. "I don't know," Ethan admitted, overwhelmed by the normalcy of it all. For 4 months, his only hobby had been survival. Before that, when his mother was still functional, he'd liked reading and drawing. But those interests felt like they belonged to a different person, a different life. "That's okay," Patricia said kindly. "We'll figure it out together. There's no rush." But there was a rush, Ethan thought. Because all of this, the nice house, the hot meals, the new clothes, could disappear at any moment. His mother had taught him that lesson well. Marcus called every day, usually in the evening after Ethan had finished dinner. These conversations became a lifeline for Ethan, a connection to the one person who'd chosen to help him without any obligation or system requirement. Marcus would tell him about his day at work. He was a welder at a manufacturing plant, or about the Iron Brotherhood's latest ride. He never pressed Ethan about how he was adjusting, just maintained a steady, reliable presence. On the 8th day at the Williams house, Marcus's evening call had a different quality to it. "How are you feeling?" "Ribs healing okay?" "Getting better," Ethan said. It was mostly true. The sharp agony had dulled to a constant ache. "Good, because I want to ask you something. Would you be okay with coming to a motorcycle event in a few days? Nothing big, just a small ride around town. Some of the guys from the club want to meet you properly. Thank you in person." Ethan hesitated. The attention made him uncomfortable, but the thought of seeing Marcus and maybe escaping the house for a while was appealing. "I guess that would be okay." "Great," Marcus said, and Ethan could hear the smile in his voice. "I'll coordinate with the Williams. It'll be good for you to get out." What Marcus didn't mention was that small ride around town was a significant understatement. In the 2 weeks since Ethan's attack, Hawk's planning had reached impressive levels of coordination. The event had grown from the initial idea of a chapter ride to something unprecedented in Midwest motorcycle community history. 15 motorcycle clubs were officially participating, representing over 900 registered riders. Detective Wallace had worked with the Cedar Rapids Police Department and the Iowa State Patrol to create a sanctioned route through the city. Local news stations had caught wind of the story. Homeless boys' heroism inspires massive biker tribute, and were planning coverage. The night before the ride, Bear called an emergency meeting of the Iron Brotherhood leadership at the clubhouse, a modest building on the south side of Cedar Rapids. Maps were spread across tables, communication plans outlined, safety protocols reviewed. But the meeting's real purpose was to discuss Ethan himself. "The kid doesn't know what's happening tomorrow," Marcus said. "He thinks it's just a small local ride with our chapter." "When does he find out?" Viper asked. She'd driven from Des Moines for the meeting, representing the Road Warriors' commitment to the event. "When he sees 900 motorcycles," Bear replied. "I know it's not ideal to surprise him, but we were worried that if we told him beforehand, he'd refuse to come. The kid doesn't think he deserves this kind of recognition." "Because he's been told his whole life he doesn't matter," Doc said quietly. "Abandoned by his mother, invisible to society, beaten for showing kindness. Why would he think anyone would celebrate him?" "Then tomorrow we show him different," Hawk said firmly. "We show him that courage matters, that kindness matters, that he matters. Not just with words, but with action. 900 riders from 15 clubs, putting aside territory and politics to honor one 12-year-old boy. That's a statement. It's also a lot of pressure," Marcus worried. "What if it overwhelms him? What if it's too much?" "Then we'll be there to support him through it," Viper assured him. "Every rider participating tomorrow knows this isn't about showing off or causing a scene. It's about one thing, letting that kid know he's not alone." The meeting continued into the night, finalizing details, assigning responsibilities, ensuring that every contingency was covered. By the time they dispersed, the plan was set. Tomorrow, Cedar Rapids would witness something extraordinary. Back at the Williams house, Ethan lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. 2 weeks had passed since the attack. 2 weeks of slowly healing body and uncertainly adjusting mind. The Williams had been true to their word, kind, consistent, patient. Destiny had warmed to him slightly, occasionally sharing bits of her own story in quiet moments. Even Tyler had made brief eye contact once or twice, small victories that Patricia celebrated with gentle encouragement. But Ethan still felt like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the kindness to evaporate, for something to go wrong. Trust was a muscle he'd forgotten how to use. His phone, a basic model Patricia had bought so people could reach him, buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Big day tomorrow. Get some rest. I'll pick you up at 10 a.m. Ethan texted back a simple "okay" and tried to sleep. He had no idea that tomorrow would change his life in ways he couldn't imagine, that 900 strangers were preparing to show him what brotherhood really meant. The morning of November 25th dawned clear and cold over Cedar Rapids, the kind of crisp autumn day that made riding weather perfect despite the chill. Ethan woke at 8, his ribs protesting only mildly as he got out of bed, a significant improvement from 2 weeks ago when even breathing had been agony. Patricia had made a full breakfast, pancakes, eggs, bacon, the works. "Big day," she said with a knowing smile when Ethan came downstairs. "Marcus called yesterday to confirm everything." "It's just a motorcycle ride," Ethan said, pouring himself orange juice. "Nothing big." Patricia and Richard exchanged a look that Ethan caught but couldn't interpret. "Right," Richard said, "just a ride." At exactly 10 o'clock, Marcus's distinctive Harley rumbled up to the house. Ethan grabbed his new jacket, a heavy denim one lined with fleece that Patricia had insisted would keep him warm, and headed out. Marcus was wearing his full Iron Brotherhood colors, his leather vest polished and patches bright in the morning sun. "You ready?" Marcus asked, handing Ethan a helmet. "As I'll ever be," Ethan replied, climbing carefully onto the bike behind Marcus. His ribs were healed enough that the ride wouldn't cause serious pain, but he'd need to hold on carefully. "We're meeting the rest of the chapter at the clubhouse first," Marcus explained as they pulled away from the Williams house. "Then we'll do a ride through town, maybe stop for lunch. Sound good?" Ethan nodded against Marcus's back, too focused on the rumble of the engine and the wind rushing past to think too deeply about it. He'd never been on a motorcycle before that night in the hospital parking lot when Marcus had raced him to emergency care. This was different, leisurely, controlled, almost peaceful. The city passed by in familiar landmarks. The convenience store where this had all started, the alley where he'd nearly died, the hospital where he'd woken to a room full of concerned bikers. As they approached the Iron Brotherhood clubhouse on the city's south side, Ethan noticed something odd. The parking lot, which should have been relatively empty on a Saturday morning, was packed. Motorcycles lined every available space, and more were parked along the street. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, confused. Marcus didn't answer, just pulled into a reserved spot near the clubhouse entrance. As he killed the engine, the doors to the building opened and people started emerging. First came Bear, his massive frame unmistakable, then Hawk, Doc, Priest, Bobby, Slider, but they kept coming. More members of the Iron Brotherhood, and then people Ethan didn't recognize, wearing different club colors, different patches, different affiliations. "Marcus?" Ethan's voice carried an edge of panic. "What is this?" "This," Marcus said, helping Ethan off the bike and removing his helmet, "is the Brotherhood showing up for you." Before Ethan could process that statement, Bear approached with a woman Ethan hadn't met before. She was Asian, maybe in her 40s, wearing a leather vest that identified her as the president of the Road Warriors. "Ethan Cole," Bear said formally. "This is Victoria Chen, president of the Road Warriors MC out of Des Moines. Viper, this is the young man we've been telling you about." Viper extended her hand, and Ethan shook it automatically, still too overwhelmed to speak. "It's an honor to meet you, Ethan. What you did for Marcus took real courage. The kind of courage that deserves recognition." I thank you, Ethan stammered, unsure of the proper response. More introductions followed in a blur. Presidents and members from clubs Ethan had never heard of. The Thunder Riders from Davenport, the Midwest Guardians from Des Moines, the Steel Horses from Dubuque, the Prairie Hawks from Waterloo, the River Runners from Quad Cities. On and on, until Ethan's head spun with names and faces. Each person shook his hand or patted his shoulder carefully, aware of his still healing injuries, and each offered words of respect and admiration. "How many people are here?" Ethan finally managed to ask Marcus. "About 900 riders from 15 different clubs," Marcus replied. "All here for you." "But why?" The question came out almost as a plea. "I didn't do anything special. I couldn't let them hurt you." "That's exactly why," a voice said from behind him. Ethan turned to find Detective Wallace standing there in civilian clothes, a leather jacket over jeans. Because when most people see violence, they look away. They tell themselves it's not their business, not their problem. But you didn't. You put yourself in danger to help someone else. And that matters. "Detective Wallace rides?" Ethan asked, latching onto this small detail because it was easier than processing the enormity of what was happening. Wallace smiled. "On my days off, I'm not in a club, but when I heard what these folks were organizing, I wanted to be here, to thank you, and to be part of something positive. This job shows me a lot of darkness. It's good to remember there's light too." Hawk approached with a clipboard and a radio. "All right, everyone, listen up. We've got the route confirmed with police escort. We'll be riding through downtown Cedar Rapids, ending at Seminole Valley Park, where we've got a lunch set up. Travel time approximately 45 minutes with stops. Remember, we're representing our clubs and this young man today. Ride safe, ride smart, follow all traffic laws." A chorus of affirmative responses rose from the assembled riders. The sound of it, hundreds of voices agreeing in unison, sent chills down Ethan's spine. Bear placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You're going to ride with Marcus at the front of the formation, right behind the police escort. That's the position of honor. Everyone here wants you to know that you're the reason we're all together today." "I don't deserve this," Ethan whispered, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't name. "Yes," Bear said firmly, "you do. And today, we're going to prove it to you." The formation of 900 motorcycles took 20 minutes to organize. Ethan watched in awe as the various clubs lined up in coordinated rows, their engines creating a thunder that resonated in his chest. Marcus helped him back onto the Harley, ensuring his helmet was secure, then took his position at the front alongside Bear and Viper. 2 Cedar Rapids police motorcycles pulled in front of them, lights flashing. One of the officers gave Hawk a thumbs up, and Hawk spoke into his radio. "All riders, prepare to roll out." The sound that followed was unlike anything Ethan had ever experienced. 900 motorcycle engines roaring to life simultaneously created a physical wall of noise that seemed to shake the very air. It was overwhelming and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. As they pulled out of the parking lot and onto the street, Ethan looked back and saw the line of motorcycles stretching behind them seemingly forever, a river of chrome and leather and determination. People on the sidewalks stopped to stare. Some pulled out phones to record, others simply watched in amazement. The route took them through the heart of Cedar Rapids, past the convenience store where Patricia Henderson came out to watch, her hand over her heart. Past the hospital where nurses and doctors who treated Ethan stood outside, some holding signs that read, "Thank you, Ethan," and heroes come in all sizes. Past Lincoln Elementary, where Ethan had last attended school before his mother's abandonment, where someone had hung a banner reading, "Lincoln Elementary is proud of Ethan Cole." At each stop, more people lined the streets. Word had spread through social media and local news about the ride and its purpose. Parents held up children to see the spectacle. Teenagers recorded videos. Elderly residents stood on their porches, some with hands over their hearts, others saluting. A group of veterans in VFW jackets stood at attention as the formation passed, recognizing courage in whatever form it took. Ethan felt tears streaming down his face, grateful for the helmet that hid his emotion. He'd spent 4 months being invisible, convinced he didn't matter to anyone. But hundreds of strangers had given up their Saturday to ride for him, to tell him without words that he mattered, that what he'd done mattered, that he wasn't alone. The ride continued through downtown, where businesses had put up messages of support in their windows. Cedar Rapids Stands with Ethan appeared on marquees and signs. The local newspaper, the Gazette, had staff outside their building photographing the procession. The spectacle was impossible to ignore, and that was exactly the point. After 45 minutes, the formation arrived at Seminole Valley Park on the city's west side. The police escort guided them to a large open area where the Park Service had given permission for the gathering. As the motorcycles filed in and parked in organized rows, Ethan finally got a full view of the scale. It wasn't just 900 riders, many had passengers, and more supporters had driven cars to meet them here. The total crowd exceeded 1,500 people, all gathered because of him. A temporary stage had been set up near the pavilion. Hawk and other organizers had clearly been busy beyond just coordinating the ride. As riders dismounted and gathered, Ethan noticed tables of food, a potluck where various clubs had contributed dishes. There were also representatives from local organizations, the Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, the Coalition for Homeless Youth. Bear guided Ethan toward the stage, Marcus staying close by his side. "We've got a few people who want to say some words," Bear explained. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. But we thought you should hear what this community thinks of you." The first speaker was Detective Wallace, who took the microphone with comfortable authority. "Good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Raymond Wallace with the Cedar Rapids Police Department. I've been a cop for 20 years, and in that time, I've seen the best and worst of humanity. 2 weeks ago, I investigated an assault on a 12-year-old boy who put himself in danger to protect a stranger. That boy, Ethan Cole, showed more courage in 5 minutes than many people show in a lifetime." The crowd applauded, and Ethan felt his face burning with embarrassment and pride in equal measure. Wallace continued, "What you've all done today, coming together across club lines, putting aside differences, taking time out of your lives to honor one child's bravery, this is community at its best. This is what it means to stand for something bigger than yourself." Ethan, I hope you're paying attention, because all these people are here to tell you something important. You matter. What you did matters, and you're not alone. More applause, louder now. Some people were chanting Ethan's name, and he didn't know whether to hide or stand taller. The next speaker was Jennifer Morrison, the social worker who'd been handling Ethan's case. "I've worked in child welfare for 15 years, she began, her voice amplified across the park. "I've seen hundreds of children come through the system, each with their own story of hardship and survival. But I've rarely seen a community response like this." Ethan represents something we all need to remember, that even in our darkest moments, even when we feel most alone, the capacity for courage and kindness exists. And when that courage is shown, it ripples outward, inspiring others. She turned to look directly at Ethan. "You've inspired an entire region to come together. These riders, these clubs, they're not just celebrating you today. They're making a commitment to watch out for vulnerable kids, to support youth programs, to be the kind of community where no child feels invisible or forgotten. That's your legacy, Ethan. That's the change you've started." Ethan's tears were flowing freely now, past the point of caring who saw. Marcus's hand on his shoulder was the only thing keeping him grounded. More speakers followed. Viper talked about the importance of unity in the motorcycle community. A representative from the Coalition for Homeless Youth discussed the crisis of unsheltered children in Iowa and how increased awareness could drive policy change. A local business owner announced a scholarship fund being established in Ethan's name to help homeless youth continue their education. Finally, Bear took the microphone. His presence commanded attention even in a crowd this large. "Ethan, come up here, son." Ethan looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragement. On shaky legs, Ethan climbed the few steps to the stage. The crowd before him was massive, hundreds of leather-clad bikers, families, community members, all watching him. "Ethan Cole," Bear said, his deep voice carrying across the park, "on behalf of the Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club, the Road Warriors, and all 15 clubs represented here today, I want to present you with this." He held up a leather vest, smaller than the ones the adults wore, but clearly custom-made. On the back was an embroidered patch showing a motorcycle with angel wings and text that read, "Honorary Brother, Iron Brotherhood MC." Around it were smaller patches from each of the 15 participating clubs. "This vest represents something we don't give lightly," Bear continued. "It represents respect, honor, and brotherhood. You've earned it 1,000 times over. Whenever you wear this, know that you've got 900 brothers and sisters across 4 states who have your back. Always." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Engines revved in celebration, creating another wall of sound. Ethan took the vest with trembling hands, staring at the craftsmanship, the patches, the tangible proof that this was real. Bear leaned down, speaking quietly enough that only Ethan could hear. "You're not alone anymore, kid. You never will be again. That's what brotherhood means." Something inside Ethan broke open. All the walls he'd built, all the armor he'd constructed to survive abandonment and violence and invisibility. He turned and hugged Bear, this massive man who'd helped organize all of this, and let himself cry in a way he hadn't since his mother left. Marcus joined them, then Viper, then more riders, until Ethan was surrounded by a protective circle of people who'd chosen, deliberately and publicly, to stand with him. When he finally pulled back, wiping his eyes, Ethan did something he hadn't done since before his mother's addiction destroyed their lives. He smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached his eyes and transformed his battered face into something young and hopeful. "Thank you," he said into the microphone, his voice small but clear. "I don't really know what to say. I never thought... I just... Thank you. All of you." It wasn't eloquent, but it was honest. And judging by the renewed applause and the emotion on faces throughout the crowd, it was enough. The rest of the afternoon unfolded like the best dream Ethan had never dared to have. He ate barbecue with members of different motorcycle clubs who treated him like family. He listened to stories of their own lives, their struggles, their triumphs. He met the other foster children from various families, kids who looked at him with a mixture of envy and hope. If it could get better for him, maybe it could for them too. Patricia and Richard Williams arrived with Destiny and Tyler, and Ethan introduced them to Marcus and the Iron Brotherhood with a pride he hadn't expected to feel. "These are my foster parents," he said, the word foster carrying less weight than it had before. Maybe temporary didn't have to mean meaningless. As the sun began to set and the gathering started to disperse, Ethan stood with Marcus looking out at the hundreds of motorcycles preparing to leave. "I still can't believe this is real," Ethan admitted. "Believe it," Marcus said, "and remember it, especially on the hard days. Because there will be hard days, that's life, but now you know you don't have to face them alone." "Why did you come back?" Ethan asked suddenly. "That night, in the alley, you got away. You could have just called the police and kept riding. Why did you come back?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Because leaving you there would have meant your courage didn't matter. that helping me cost you everything and got you nothing in return. I couldn't live with that. Brotherhood means you come back, always, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Ethan nodded, understanding something fundamental about the world he hadn't known before. There were people who left, like his mother, and people who came back, like Marcus, and now he had hundreds of people who'd promised they'd come back if he ever needed them. As Marcus drove Ethan back to the Williams house that evening, the boy wore his new vest with pride, the leather still stiff and new against his shoulders. The house on Maple Street looked different somehow as they pulled up, not more welcoming necessarily, but more permanent. Less like a temporary stop and more like a place where healing could happen. "Same time next week?" Marcus asked. "We could go for a ride, just the two of us. No crowds, no cameras, just riding." "I'd like that," Ethan said. And he meant it. Winter settled over Cedar Rapids with the steady determination of Iowa weather, transforming the city into a landscape of white and gray. Ethan watched the first significant snowfall from his bedroom window in the Williams house, marveling at how different his life looked now compared to where he'd been just 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks since the attack. 6 weeks since Marcus came back. 6 weeks since 900 motorcycles thundered through the city in his honor. The vest bear had presented him hung on a special hook on his wall, a constant reminder that he wasn't invisible anymore. Patricia had helped him frame some of the photos from the ride, one showing the winter settled over Cedar Rapids with the steady determination of Iowa weather, transforming the city into a landscape of white and gray. Ethan watched the first significant snowfall from his bedroom window in the Williams house, marveling at how different his life looked now compared to where he'd been just 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks since the attack. 6 weeks since Marcus came back. 6 weeks since 900 motorcycles thundered through the city in his honor. The vest bear had presented him hung on a special hook on his wall, a constant reminder that he wasn't invisible anymore. Patricia had helped him frame some of the photos from the ride, one showing the seemingly endless line of motorcycles stretching through downtown, another of him standing between Marcus and Bear on the stage, and his favorite, a candid shot of him smiling, genuinely smiling, surrounded by members of different clubs who'd become his extended family. School had been an adjustment. Marion Middle School was larger than Lincoln Elementary, and Ethan had missed so much curriculum that catching up felt overwhelming at first. But the Williams had arranged for tutoring, and his teachers, who'd all heard about his story through local news coverage, gave him patient support rather than judgment. The hardest part wasn't the academics. It was the attention. Students who'd never spoken to him before suddenly wanted to be his friend. Some genuinely, others clearly drawn to the novelty of knowing that kid from the biker rally. Ethan had learned to distinguish between the two, though the process was exhausting. "You'll figure out who's real," Destiny had advised one evening as they did homework at the kitchen table. She'd warmed considerably to Ethan over the weeks, their shared experience of the foster system creating a bond neither had expected. "Give it time. The ones who stick around when you're not interesting anymore, those are your real friends." Tyler, the 8-year-old who rarely spoke, had also begun to open up slightly. One night, he'd knocked quietly on Ethan's door and asked if he could see the vest. Ethan had shown it to him, explaining what each patch meant, which club it represented. Tyler had touched the leather reverently, then whispered, "You're brave." It was the longest sentence Ethan had heard him speak. Marcus kept his promise about weekly rides. Every Saturday, weather permitting, he'd arrive at the Williams house on his Harley, and they'd spend hours on Iowa's back roads, just riding and talking. Sometimes they discussed heavy things, Ethan's mother, his fears about the future, his struggle to trust that good things could last. Other times they talked about nothing important, movies, sports, the best places to get pizza in Cedar Rapids. "You ever think about learning to ride yourself?" Marcus asked one particularly mild December afternoon as they stopped at a scenic overlook outside the city. "I'm only 12, Ethan pointed out, though the idea appealed to him more than he wanted to admit. "Sure, but you can learn the basics now. How to maintain a bike, the mechanics of it, then when you're old enough for your license, you'll be ready." Marcus studied him carefully. "The brotherhood isn't just about riding, though. It's about having something that's yours, something that gives you freedom and purpose." "Is that what it gave you?" Ethan asked. Marcus nodded. "When I finally got away from my dad, I was angry at the world. Didn't trust anyone, didn't think I deserved good things. Then I met Bear and the Iron Brotherhood. They taught me that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who stands with you when things get hard. They gave me purpose beyond just surviving." "And now you're doing that for me," Ethan said quietly, understanding dawning. "Now I'm passing it forward," Marcus corrected. "That's how it works. Someone helps you, then you help someone else. It's a chain, and you're part of it now." The Iron Brotherhood had indeed made Ethan part of their chain. He'd become a regular at the clubhouse, attending family events and barbecues. The members treated him like a nephew, protected but not smothered, encouraged but not pressured. Doc taught him basic motorcycle maintenance in the club's garage. Priest shared books and talked philosophy. Bobby brought him to Little League practices, even though Ethan wasn't quite ready to play yet, with his ribs still healing completely. But the ripple effects of that November ride extended far beyond Ethan personally. The attention it had drawn to youth homelessness had sparked real change in Cedar Rapids and the surrounding communities. The Coalition for Homeless Youth received a surge in donations following the ride, over $50,000 raised through online campaigns and direct contributions from motorcycle clubs across the Midwest. They'd been able to expand their emergency shelter capacity and hire 2 additional social workers. The scholarship fund established in Ethan's name had grown to nearly $30,000, enough to provide educational support for multiple homeless or foster youth pursuing their diplomas. Jennifer Morrison, who served on the fund's board, told Ethan that 3 teenagers were already benefiting from it, kids who might have dropped out without that financial lifeline. Several local businesses had launched job training programs specifically targeting homeless youth, partnering with motorcycle clubs who volunteered as mentors. The Iron Brotherhood, Road Warriors, and Thunder Riders had each committed to taking on youth apprentices in their members' various trades: welding, mechanics, construction, nursing. "You started something," Bear told Ethan during one Saturday visit to the clubhouse. "You reminded people that homeless kids aren't statistics. They're individuals with potential, with courage, with value. That's changed how this community thinks about the issue." "I didn't mean to start anything," Ethan said, still uncomfortable with being seen as some kind of symbol. "The best movements never come from people seeking attention," Bear replied wisely. "They come from people doing the right thing without expecting anything in return. That's what you did, and look at what it's created." As Christmas approached, Ethan experienced another first, a real holiday celebration. The Williams family had traditions, decorating the tree together, baking cookies, watching classic movies. Patricia involved all 3 foster children equally, making sure each felt included. For Ethan, who'd spent the previous Christmas sleeping in an alley with nothing but a thin blanket, the warmth and normalcy felt almost surreal. On Christmas Eve, Marcus arrived with a large box wrapped in motorcycle-themed paper. "From all the brothers," he said, placing it under the Williams tree. "They wanted to make sure your first real Christmas in a while was special." When Ethan opened it the next morning, surrounded by the Williams family and Marcus, who'd been invited for Christmas dinner, he found a leather jacket, not a vest, but a proper riding jacket with armor in the shoulders and elbows. It was sized for him now, but with room to grow. Inside the collar was a label reading, "For Ethan Cole, who showed us what courage looks like." With respect and brotherhood, Iron Brotherhood MC. There were other gifts too. Protective gloves from the Road Warriors, riding boots from the Thunder Riders, a high-quality helmet from the Midwest Guardians. Each gift represented another club that had participated in the November ride, another group of people who'd chosen to remember him beyond that single day. "You're not going to be able to actually ride alone for years," Patricia said practically, though she was smiling. "What are you supposed to do with all this gear?" "Grow into it," Ethan replied, running his hands over the jacket's leather. "And remember that I've got people waiting for me to be ready." "That you do, son," Richard agreed. "That you absolutely do." As winter deepened into January, Ethan settled more fully into his new life. The nightmares about the attack came less frequently. The hypervigilance that had been necessary for street survival gradually relaxed. He still had hard days, moments when he'd wake up panicking, convinced he was back in that alley, or times when he'd see someone who looked like his mother and feel that old abandonment wound tear open again. But now he had tools to handle those moments. Patricia had arranged therapy with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a counselor who specialized in trauma and foster care issues. Dr. Mitchell never pushed Ethan to talk about things before he was ready, but she gave him strategies for managing anxiety and processing difficult emotions. She also helped him understand that healing wasn't linear. There would be setbacks, and that was okay. "You're not broken," Dr. Mitchell told him during one session. "You're someone who survived impossible circumstances and came out with your capacity for courage and kindness intact. That's not damage, that's resilience." "It doesn't always feel like resilience," Ethan admitted. "Sometimes it just feels like I'm barely holding it together." "Barely holding it together is still holding it together," she replied. "And every day you do that, you're building strength. One day you'll look back and realize you're not just surviving anymore. You're thriving." In February, Ethan reached a milestone he hadn't thought possible. He made the decision to officially stay with the Williams family long-term. Jennifer Morrison had been working to locate his mother, but Sarah Cole had effectively disappeared into the drug underworld. After 3 months with no contact, no indication she was seeking treatment or custody, the process of terminating parental rights would eventually begin. "How do you feel about that?" Jennifer asked gently when she discussed the situation with Ethan. He'd expected to feel grief or anger or something dramatic. Instead, what he felt was relief mixed with a sadness that had been there so long, it felt like part of him. "I feel like I already lost her a long time ago," he said honestly, way before she left. "The drugs took her first, so this is just making official what's already true. And the Williams, you're comfortable staying with them." Ethan thought about Patricia's patient help with homework, Richard's quiet encouragement, the way they'd never promised to replace his mother, but had simply offered steady, reliable care. He thought about Destiny, who'd become like a sister, teaching him how to navigate foster care's unwritten rules. He thought about Tyler, who was slowly coming out of his shell, who sometimes joined Ethan and Marcus on their Saturday rides. "Yeah," he said, "I'm comfortable. They're good people. And I think I'm ready to stop running." The decision seemed to settle something in Ethan. He threw himself into school with renewed focus, his grades steadily improving. He joined the school's art club, rediscovering his childhood love of drawing. His sketches of motorcycles and the November ride caught the attention of his art teacher, who entered one in a regional youth competition. When it won second place, Marcus and half the Iron Brotherhood showed up to the awards ceremony, their presence filling the small auditorium with leather and pride. In March, as Iowa began its slow thaw toward spring, Bear approached Ethan with a proposal. "Every year, the Iron Brotherhood does a major charity ride for a cause we vote on. This year, the brothers voted unanimously. We want to ride for homeless youth services in your honor." Make it an annual thing. The Ethan Cole Memorial Ride for Homeless Youth. I'm not dead, Ethan pointed out, though he was smiling. Memorial meaning in memory of what you survived and what you represent, Bear clarified with a grin. Unless you have a better name. The Forward Motion Ride, Ethan suggested after a moment of thought, because that's what we're all trying to do. Keep moving forward, even when it's hard. Bear's expression softened. Kid, you're wise beyond your years. Forward Motion Ride it is. We'll make it happen every November anniversary of the first ride. Get all the clubs together again, raise money, raise awareness. Keep the momentum going. I'd like to help organize it, Ethan said. Not just be the face of it, but actually do the work, if that's allowed. More than allowed, it's perfect, Bear assured him. You'll work with Hawk on planning. He'll teach you logistics, coordination, all the behind-the-scenes work that makes big events successful. That's real brotherhood skills right there. Over the following months, Ethan threw himself into planning the Forward Motion Ride. Working with Hawk, he learned about permits and insurance, route planning and safety protocols, fundraising and publicity. He reached out to Jennifer Morrison and other youth advocates, gathering data about the need and where donations would have the most impact. The work gave him purpose beyond his own recovery. He was channeling what had happened to him into something that could help others. Every spreadsheet he organized, every phone call he made, every meeting he attended was proof that he'd moved from victim to survivor to advocate. His 13th birthday in May was celebrated at the Iron Brotherhood Clubhouse with a party that included the Williams family, his schoolmates, and what seemed like every member of every motorcycle club within 50 miles. Someone had made a cake shaped like a motorcycle. Marcus gave him a leather-bound journal with a note inside. For recording your journey. You've got an important story, Ethan. Don't forget to write it down. As summer arrived and school let out, Ethan signed up for a youth mentorship program run jointly by the Coalition for Homeless Youth and several motorcycle clubs. He'd be paired with younger kids in the foster system, sharing his experience and offering support. The irony wasn't lost on him. 6 months ago, he'd been the one needing help, and now he was in a position to help others. His first mentee was a 10-year-old boy named Carlos Rivera, who'd recently entered foster care after his single father was deported. Carlos was angry, scared, and convinced that nothing good would ever happen to him again. Ethan recognized all of it. He'd felt the same way. I'm not going to tell you it gets easy, Ethan said during their first meeting at a park where Marcus had driven them. Because sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's really hard. But what I learned is that you don't have to go through it alone. There are people who will stand with you if you let them. Who stood with you? Carlos asked suspiciously. Ethan gestured to Marcus, who was working on his bike nearby, giving them space but staying close. Him, for one. And about 900 other people who decided I mattered. Not because I'm special, but because they believe every kid matters, including you. It was a start. Small, tentative, but a start. As autumn approached again and November drew near, preparations for the first annual Forward Motion Ride intensified. This time, Ethan wasn't a surprise passenger. He was part of the organizing committee. 20 motorcycle clubs had committed to participating, representing over 1,200 riders. The route would be longer this year, ending at a fairground where they'd have a full festival with live music, food vendors, and information booths from various youth services organizations. The night before the ride, Ethan stood in his room looking at his reflection in the mirror. He wore his riding jacket, the one the clubs had given him for Christmas, and his honorary vest over it. The boy looking back at him was different from the one who'd huddled in alleys a year ago. Physically, he'd grown. Better nutrition and stable housing had added healthy weight and height. His bruises had long since faded, his ribs completely healed. but the deeper changes were less visible. There was confidence in his posture now, purpose in his eyes. He'd learned that being vulnerable didn't mean being weak, that accepting help wasn't admitting defeat, that hope wasn't naive, it was courageous. A knock on his door pulled him from his reflection. "Come in." Marcus entered, carrying 2 bottles of root beer. He handed one to Ethan and raised his own. "To tomorrow, and to you, kid. You've come so far." "We've come so far," Ethan corrected, clinking his bottle against Marcus's. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, without all of you." "That's the point," Marcus said. "Nobody should have to do it alone." That's what the Forward Motion Ride is really about, showing people they're not alone, that there's a whole community ready to support them if they just reach out. "Do you think my mom will ever see any of this?" Ethan asked suddenly. It was a question he'd avoided for months, but with the anniversary approaching, it had been weighing on him. Will she ever know what happened, what I became? Marcus chose his words carefully. "I don't know, Ethan. Maybe someday. But here's what I do know. Whether she ever finds out or not, you've built something real. You've helped change lives, raised awareness, inspired people. That's your legacy, independent of her. You don't need her validation to know you matter." Ethan nodded, feeling the old wound ache but not bleed. "I think I'm finally starting to believe that." "Good," Marcus said, "because tomorrow you're going to see 1,200 people who believe it too." The second annual Forward Motion Ride exceeded every expectation. The weather cooperated with clear skies and mild temperatures perfect for riding. 1,200 motorcycles formed up in organized rows, their riders representing not just Iowa, but 6 surrounding states. Local media covered the event extensively, but this time the focus wasn't just on Ethan's story, it was on the broader issue of youth homelessness and what communities could do to address it. Ethan rode with Marcus at the front of the formation again, but this time he understood what it meant. The position of honor wasn't about him being special or heroic. It was about him representing all the kids who'd fallen through society's cracks, who needed someone to come back for them, who deserved forward motion toward better lives. The festival at the fairground raised over $100,000 for youth services. Representatives from organizations across the Midwest attended, networking and sharing best practices. Former foster youth shared their success stories. Current foster kids met potential mentors. It was messy and loud and beautiful, a celebration of resilience and community. As the sun set and the event began to wind down, Ethan found himself back on stage, this time by choice rather than surprise. He took the microphone and looked out at the crowd. Riders, families, community members, kids in situations like his had been. "A year ago," he began, his voice steady, "I was homeless, alone, and convinced I didn't matter to anyone. Then I did something that felt small at the time. I tried to help someone who was in trouble. That decision changed my life, not because of what I did, but because of how people responded. Marcus came back for me. 900 riders showed up to tell me I mattered. And this community wrapped around me and showed me what family really means." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I'm standing here today because people chose forward motion over indifference. They chose action over apathy. They chose to care about a kid they didn't know because they believed every kid deserves that care. And now it's my turn to pass that forward. It's all of our turns. Because somewhere in our communities right now, there's another kid who feels invisible, who's convinced nobody cares. We need to prove them wrong. We need to show them what I learned, that courage matters, kindness matters, and they matter. That's what the Forward Motion Ride is about. That's what brotherhood is about, and that's what we're going to keep doing, one kid at a time, one ride at a time, one act of courage at a time." The applause was thunderous, but what meant more to Ethan were the faces in the crowd. Carlos, his mentee, watching with wide eyes and something like hope in his expression. Tyler, standing with the Williams family, actually smiling. Jennifer Morrison with tears streaming down her face, and throughout the crowd, dozens of other kids in foster care or homeless situations, seeing possibility where before there'd been only darkness. That night, as Marcus drove Ethan back to the Williams house back home, they rode in comfortable silence. The streets of Cedar Rapids passed by, familiar now rather than threatening. This city had been where Ethan hit his lowest point, but it had also become the place where he'd learned to rise. As they pulled up to the house on Maple Street, Ethan saw the porch light on, Patricia and Richard visible through the window waiting for his return. Destiny was probably upstairs doing homework. Tyler was likely reading before bed. It was ordinary and domestic and exactly what he'd needed. "Same time next week?" Marcus asked as Ethan climbed off the bike. "Same time next week," Ethan confirmed. Then, before Marcus could pull away, he added, "Hey Marcus, thank you for coming back for everything." Marcus pulled off his helmet and looked at Ethan seriously. "You saved my life, kid. But more than that, you reminded me why it's worth saving. So thank you too. For being brave enough to help a stranger and brave enough to let strangers help you back." As Marcus rode away, his tail light disappearing into the November darkness, Ethan stood on the porch for a moment longer. A year ago, he'd been sleeping in alleys, convinced his life didn't matter. Now he was home, surrounded by people who'd chosen him, part of a movement that was changing how his community treated its most vulnerable young people. He'd learned that courage wasn't about being unafraid, it was about acting despite fear. That family wasn't just biology, it was commitment and choice. That healing wasn't a destination but a journey, with forward motion even when the path was unclear. And that sometimes, when you're brave enough to help someone else, the whole world shows up to help you back. Ethan Cole walked inside, closing the door on the cold November night. Tomorrow, he'd wake up, go to school, meet with Carlos, work on plans for next year's ride. The work would continue, the healing would continue, the forward motion would continue, because that's what survivors did. They kept moving, kept growing, kept choosing hope even when darkness whispered otherwise. And behind him, holding him up, riding with him, were 1,200 motorcyclists and an entire community who'd made a promise. "You're not alone. You matter. We've got your back. Always." That promise, forged in a November night of violence and reborn in a November day of thunder and recognition, would echo forward through years and lives and countless other children who needed to know they weren't forgotten. Because one boy had shown courage when it mattered most, and 900 strangers had chosen to make sure that courage was rewarded, remembered, and replicated. The forward motion ride would continue. The brotherhood would endure. And Ethan Cole, once abandoned and beaten, would spend his life proving that every child deserves someone to come back for them.